Welcome to the PHFA Certificate in Elder Service Coordination Program. Today's topic is elder abuse and neglect, and these webinars, in conjunction with specified sessions at the PHFA Housing Services Conference, will enable you to be eligible to receive the Certificate in Elder Service Coordination, which will be issued in partnership with PHFA and the California University of Pennsylvania Rural Communities Institute. Our presenter this morning is David Shallcross. Mr. Shallcross joined the ranks of the Office of Attorney General as a community liaison in the Public Protection Division's Elder Abuse Unit in 2008. In this capacity, he has conducted hundreds of seminars and senior expos throughout the state, reaching thousands of people with vital information to protect the citizens of the Commonwealth. He was promoted to Senior Community Liaison and Coordinator of the Elder Abuse Unit in 2011. As such, Mr. Shallcross has handled elder abuse complaints that are received on a daily basis and has appeared 3 times on PCN cable television as a specialist on fraud against older adults and has testified before the Pennsylvania House of Representatives Aging and Older Adult Services Committee, as well as participating as a panelist on the State Senate Democratic Policy Committee's Safety and Wellness for Pennsylvania's Senior Citizens Roundtable. Mr. Shallcross acts as an ambassador to governmental agencies, legislators, public organizations, schools, senior citizens, and other community groups. He is responsible for presentations on various topics that include cyber safety, anti-bullying, gun violence, prescription drug abuse, identity theft, senior crime prevention, financial fraud, and consumer concerns. He is now under the direction of the Education and Outreach section of the office, and Mr. Shallcross has worked to protect our communities for over 30 years. Thank you, Dave, for being here.
Well, my pleasure.
All right.
There we go.
And then we're going to
Thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to come out and educate more people about the senior citizens being targeted for abuse, fraud, and exploitation. We're going to go through the program today and give you some ideas of what to be watchful of and how to respond to such situations. We need to zero in on crime against our seniors. They're a section of our populace that's quite heavily targeted by scam artists, family members, and caretakers that aren't on the up and up. There's a lot of people that are looking to take advantage of a senior for multiple reasons, and we're going to examine these various crimes and abuse against seniors to look at what preventative measures can be taken. We're going to review current data, look at future projections. We're going to examine the demographics. We will define elder abuse, learn how seniors are abused, examine major crimes that are committed against our seniors, and learn some preventative measures. Definition of an older adult is a person within the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania who is 60 years of age or older. We know that seniors have an estimated 40.3 million Americans are over 65 years of age. That's nationwide. In 2010, the internet usage among older population is up 31%. Every time I do a program for a senior audience, I always ask, how many of you are online? How many are using the computer? And a lot of times it's to communicate with family. They may have grandchildren that live out of state. They might have other relatives that they'd like to reconnect with. Some are still attending school reunions, and it's a great way to stay in communication with some old classmates. So we know that the seniors are online. Senior population is projected to more than double from the 40.3 million in 2010 that was estimated to an 83.7 million estimated in the year 2050. These services are going to need to be increased as well. Statewide, we are the 4th state in ranking for our percentage of seniors within our population. You can see below that, number 1 is, of course, Florida. West Virginia surprises people as second. Maine is a real big surprise. Awful cold in Maine, at least the last time I was there, but they have a large percentage of seniors. And then, of course, Pennsylvania. Americans overall, 65 years older and are a fast-growing demographic. We know that seniors are living longer due to medications and other technologies. In 2011, the baby boom generation began to turn 65. I myself am a baby boomer. By 2030, it is estimated that there will be 72 million seniors. Imagine that. This is equivalent to 1 in 5 Americans. Elderly are described as persons 85 years of age or older. Estimated 5 million Americans fall into that group. They account for 2% of the U.S. population, and they're the fastest growing segment of seniors. And we know seniors are living longer. They become vulnerable as they age, though, due to cognitive and physical functions and declines. We have to consider these concerns when we deal and interact with our seniors and our elderly. We have to be aware of it and be able to respond to this. They are less aware of their vulnerabilities themselves sometimes. MCI is mild cognitive impairment. It's a condition that comes on early, even as early as 55 years of age, where the front portion of your mind, where your decision-making skills with finance and to detect fraud or scams are the first section of your brain that are affected under MCI, and you will be very, very alert. You'll be able to interact as normal. They recall stories, still perform puzzles and minor tasks. The only thing that seems to be different is they're not making good money decisions, and that is a real problem as we age. And of course, services are going to be required to be more flexibility and more adaptation to help these folks as we move along. And you folks on the webinar here, as dealing with these people in your community, are going to be sometimes called upon to find out what might be happening with an older adult living in your community. Why is there an issue? Why is there a problem? Their needs are going to change as they decline or become older, and it's good for you to be aware of these things. We do know that females outlive the men, and you'll see that on this chart that there's a difference between the populations, and it's age calculated, so you'll see that very clearly with the red being the females. A lot of people don't like to talk about being victimized. Many seniors alter their lifestyle. They increase the locks on their doors. They decrease the time that they go out and spend in the neighborhood. They're fearful. They don't like to answer the door to strangers. They won't go out after dark. And it can also create a sense of loneliness and isolation. And isolation is very dangerous.
Isn't there a big event coming up August the 4th all across our area?
National Night Out.
National Night Out.
National Night Out. It's a great one, Alicia. National Night Out is a national crime prevention program to have communities put on a porch light and sit out on the front steps or out in a lawn chair out in the front lawn and communicate with your neighbors, people in the neighborhood, show a group effort to isolate people that are committing crimes, to show them that you are alert, you're involved in your community, in your neighborhood, and you're acting as one neighborhood against crime. So it's a great idea on August the 4th if you can participate. There is also programs and festivals being hosted in many towns by the local police departments, state police, county sheriffs, county district attorney's office. Emergency services will also come out and be involved. It's a great way just to bond together and show the people in the neighborhood that you are all collectively fighting crime and you're not going to be accepting being a victim.
I know a lot of my properties, I actually got invited to 2 of them, and unfortunately I can't, but a lot of our service coordinators and property managers, they put that National Night Out on their calendar, and they not only open it up to the residents of their property, but they open it up to the entire community for everybody to come, and it's really has become a really big deal.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's a great thing. You can actually go online to the National Town Watch Association and get more information on National Night Out for free. Also, the National Crime Prevention Council, the NCPC, the McGruff.org, they also have information on hosting a National Night Out and Town Watch meetings and block captains and all that kind of great stuff. That would be excellent to start to promote in your communities. There's a real fear of crime, because the potential recovery from physical or financial injury for an older adult is very limited. You know, if you break a leg or a hip when you're 35, you're going to recover much quicker than if you're 85. They have a loss of money or physical faculties that have more severe effects on them than other age groups. You know, if you lose a check in the mail because it was stolen, it was a $500 check, you make it up. You work a little extra overtime. You find other ways to recover from it. Once you're retired and you're not working, there is no way to make overtime. There is no recovery. So they have to look for other ways. One of the things they can do also is the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, PCCD, also has a victims compensation fund. If you have a community member, regardless of age, that's a victim of a crime and the police report has been filed, you can contact PCCD online and get the victims compensation information form and have them fill out an application. They may be eligible for some type of recovery of a portion of those funds. And the media often will portray the elderly as victims. And that gets in their minds. They'll watch television, see older folks being victimized, and assume that that could also be them. The most common crimes that we see against our older adults: financial crimes and elder abuse. Property crimes and violent crimes aren't quite as frequent, but the two major concerns that I see are financial and elder abuse. Financial crimes include fraud, scams, identity theft, healthcare fraud, and financial exploitation. Financial crimes take cash, credit, ratings, and other assets by deception, of course, and they're capable criminals with excellent people skills. They'll smile in your face, befriend you, and then steal, often involving people that are very pleasant and even helpful. So when you have an older adult in your neighborhood and all of a sudden there's a new person in their life that's visiting quite often in the community, they seem to be around a lot, they seem to be leading that senior and that older adult out to the bank, to the store, they seem to be purchasing items on behalf of that new friend, that might be something to report to Aging Services in your county, the Community Office on Aging. Seniors have accumulated resources. They may own their home outright. They have insurance, pension plans, savings, bonds. So, you know, when you ask a criminal, why are you targeting an older adult? The answer is that's where the money is. They're vulnerable based on their lifestyle. You know, most seniors are quite connected to their telephone. You know, younger folks today, it's the tablet, the smartphone, the iPod. Older adults, it's just a home phone. If that phone rings, they're right on it. My father-in-law is a great example. The telephone doesn't get to the third ring. He's on it and answering it. And I said, well, everyone's here. Why are you running to the telephone? The whole family's gathered around the house. Who could be calling? It's important. Doesn't seem to matter. He can't let the phone ring. And a lot of seniors are that way. Mailbox is another place where they have to have the mail. If the mail's late, they start to be concerned about the post carrier. Where's the mailman? Why don't I have my mail? They're home alone a lot. They have time to listen. They're too polite to hang up on callers that are soliciting them. They have assets, and they have limited experience with financial investments. Sometimes can no longer do things for themselves. These are all ways that they have become vulnerable to people looking to take advantage. They're often concerned with maintaining their finances. You know, as we live longer, you need more retirement funds to survive. People were planning to, you know, maybe have their retirement at 65 or 68 years of age and then lived into their 70s. We have more and more people living past 80 and into 90s. So you have to extend that. Many are isolated by a disability or fear. Many are trusting, often too embarrassed to report that they've been a victim of some type of financial crime or elder abuse. Fraud often involves deceit in the commission of a financial crime. People who commit these crimes offer prizes, deals, opportunities, bargains, and are most often unknown to that senior. Examples can be home repair, auto repairs, work-at-home schemes, so on and so on.
I remember when I was a service coordinator, I had a resident who got in on the lottery scheme. So he would get these notices that he could send, he was a guaranteed winner, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Even gave him the check. And, he had to send X amount of dollars. And it finally took, one of his friends, took him to the bank where they explained that the check that he was going to deposit into his account and then send the money, that it was not a good check. But he was totally convinced that he had literally hit the lottery, and no one could tell him otherwise until we actually had to have the bank sit down with him and explain that the check was not real.
Yeah, and they look very, very convincing today with technology and the quality of printers. These phony checks that are sent out as a first payment of your large prize with instructions, just like Alicia said, to go to the bank and deposit this account into your account, rather. Then you're going to withdraw the service fees and taxes, and it's usually probably 80-85% of the value of the check. Then they're instructed to send them on by a wire transfer, maybe at the local grocery store or pharmacy where they use the MoneyGram or Western Union type service. And they're also often called upon to go to get a prepaid cash card. They're sold on the rack like the gift cards. And it looks just like a credit card or a gift card would be. The only difference is once you've authorized those numbers and that account number to the prize patrol or whoever it is on the other end, they're going to electronically take those funds and your card is worthless. A lot of seniors fall for that. We also have a condition called stealth fraud, where someone's assets are being controlled without their knowledge. That is basically falls under identity theft. A lot of times you may not be aware of it until you discover it much too late. All of a sudden a bill collector is calling or sending you mailers saying you owe money, and you're going, I don't have an account with these people. What is this all about? Well, your account was taken over or a new account was initiated in your name and social security number, but you had no knowledge of it.
My dad right now, he just turned 71, and he has, they've tried to get him credit cards 4 times. I don't know exactly what it is about him, but he actually has one of those services that as soon as someone applies for a card in his name, they send him a letter and notify him, and he goes through the process. He called the 3 reporting agencies, put a freeze, and said, I'm not opening any accounts for 6 months, and we have yet to figure out exactly, usually a person will get their identity tax maybe once. We're talking, this is like 4 or 5 times IRS, and I don't know exactly what makes him the draw.
Well, it happens quite more frequently than people think, and it's not a once and you're done. When you have your identity compromised, it will reoccur over and over again. That's actually a common thing now. Initially, back in the day when people first started talking about identity theft, it was a once and done, and they'd move on to another victim. But now the criminals are realizing that they can exploit that information quite often from different avenues until it's stopped. And your dad did the right thing. Alicia was just telling us how he put a freeze on his credit with the 3 major credit bureaus. That's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And you can go to their websites and learn about that. It's very easy to do. It puts a block on your credit that people cannot open new accounts. It doesn't have any control over existing accounts or your credit cards, but it blocks people from creating new accounts with your information without your knowledge and consent. It's surprising that sometimes we even see younger people falling in this category, where you might have somebody who's 17 or 18 years old and they apply for a college application and a loan to go to school. It's declined because they have $400,000 in debt, and they're saying, I'm 18 years old, how do I have $400,000? I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you have a house in Virginia Beach, you have a boat, you have 2 cars. They're like, no, I don't. Well, someone has compromised their identity. Even young people have this issue. And a lot of times we know it's family related when it's a younger person that's involved. Sometimes there's a divorce in the family or a falling out with a relative who may have had access to that child's information. So we have to watch for identity theft at all ages, at all levels, and it does reoccur pretty frequently. Scams are a great way for people to not just take your money, but also your identity, and we know that. Sometimes the scammers are over the telephone, and we hear about things like the sweepstakes fraud, Sometimes it's by mail. Sometimes it's the grandparent scam where they'll call up and say, "Grandmom, I'm in trouble. Can you send me some money to help me out of the situation?" Don't tell mom and dad, right? They don't want anyone to know, because if the family member calls the house, mom and dad are going to say, well, no, your grandson Jimmy is right here doing his homework at the table. He's not in Mexico on spring break. What are you talking about? So we know these scams come in many different forms through many different mediums. So we try to teach people to watch out for the scams by using the word scam. S stands for sudden. C for contact. A, act now. M, money or information's needed. So when you hear suddenly you're contacted by someone that tells you to act quickly, act now, and they're requesting money or information, that equals a scam. So there's a great way to kind of detect scams without even hearing what the cover story, I call it, what the topic is. Is it the grandparent scam? Is it the sweepstakes scam? Is it the IRS scam? You missed jury duty. You've donated to this particular charity in the past and are calling for another donation. Well, is it really the charity? Is that mailer actually coming from a legitimate source? Publishers Clearinghouse doesn't mail you information asking you to be a winner. They show up at your door with the grand prize. So a lot of times we have to be considering that the cover story is going to change, but the mechanics of a scam usually are very, very similar each time. And that's why we use the sudden contact, act now, or money information for people to be forewarned of these new scams. Elder abuse itself is a term referring to any knowing, intentional, or negligent act by a caregiver or any other person that causes harm or serious risk of harm to a vulnerable adult. So we know that it can be many things: physical, emotional, sexual, exploitation, neglect, which includes self-neglect. The older adult themselves can harm themselves, and abandonment. So these are the topics. When we talk about elder abuse, financial exploitation is not just the frauds that we already covered, but it includes things with family members, people known to them, people in positions of control or authority over them, maybe a housing manager, maybe a physician, maybe an attorney, maybe a financial planner, maybe a caregiver or a nurse or a home health aide, or a family member again. So financial exploitation can be all those things, where they're losing their finances and assets due to these people being in those positions. Self-neglect, caregiver neglect, physical, mental, emotional, and of course sexual abuse. These are all situations when it affects someone over the age of 60 that we fall under elder abuse. Improper use of an elder person's funds. And that can not just be taking cash, it could be opening credit accounts, it can be renaming property or assets into someone else's control. It can also be done by forging checks. It can also be done through a will, through a conservatorship, a guardianship, or the misuse of a power of attorney document. Warning signs. Unexplained withdrawals of large sums of money, okay? That's usually a sign that there's some financial exploitation. Abrupt changes in wills or other financial forms. Funds disappearing. Valuable possessions, antiques, and things missing. Sudden interest by that new friend or a family member we haven't seen. Excessive gifts, financial reimbursement for care or companionship that's in excess of what would normally be expected. You know, people can pay for home care, but it should be reasonable. It should be what the market standard is. It shouldn't be outrageous. You shouldn't have to buy somebody a brand new car for them to come by and to give you some information. The information you need to provide any type of evidence can be very simple. It can just be a suspicion. To report these type of things, you know, it's always best to call and report. The best answer is they came out, investigated, and found nothing wrong. That's fine. To me, that's a win. The senior wasn't harmed in any way, they're not out anything, and you were looking out for them. I don't have a problem with that. Please, if you see anything unusual, suspicious, make the report to the aging services in your county. They will determine what evidence is there. Usually it's those warning signs that we heard about. A new family member who we haven't seen in a long time manipulating the person. changes in their habits, changes in their finances. They used to go to church, used to go to the grocery store, used to go and play bingo every week. Now no one sees them at all. They isolated that person. The family member or whoever's trying to take control has isolated that older adult to stay in the home, not to be out with their friends, because friends talk. And they don't want that older adult to say, well, you know, my daughter Mary Ann all of a sudden is now taking control of everything I do. They don't want that word out. So these are all warning signs that you can see. Being a property manager, being involved in your community at the level that you are, you may detect this. You may say, geez, that's odd. We used to see Jane all the time. Where's Jane been? Question those things. Stop and visit. Knock on the door and ask how Jane is doing. Does she need anything? There's nothing wrong with being friendly and knocking on the door to say hello and ask if she needs anything. Is everything okay? Anything new in your life? Is there anything you need to tell me? Check in. Doesn't hurt.
The other thing is maybe something as simple as not being able to pay the rent.
Oh,
when
sure.
They, you know, sometimes they'll legitimately forget to write the check. But sometimes they don't want to write the check because all of a sudden there's not money in the account.
Right.
Or when recertifications come up, our service coordinators don't do the recertificate, but the property managers do. And, you know, if there's a large sum of money, then the resident has to try to explain, well, what happened to it. It could be a great opportunity to, try to get in on that something is happening that shouldn't be happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great point. You have to watch when somebody has a fiduciary responsibility over that older adult. They have laws and regulations they need to follow. They can't use these funds and assets for their own benefit. It must benefit the older adult. Annually, nationwide, financial losses by elder financial exploitation are estimated at $2.9 billion, and that was back in 2011. And I'm sure it's probably increased, and I know awareness is increasing. We're trying to get more people involved in understanding what elder abuse is and how we can combat it. So there's a national push to warn people and alert people to be watchful of elder abuse. Self-neglect is a form of elder abuse. When the elderly person threatens their own health or safety, maybe they just decide, I'm not going to bathe any longer. I don't like getting in the shower. I don't want to take my medication. I'm tired of taking pills. I'm going to do what I like. I don't care. They start following medical advice. They stop following safety precautions, and they start to really put themselves in a dangerous situation of malnutrition, dehydration, depression can set in. These are all self-neglect issues that have to be reported. Sometimes all it takes is a visit to the doctor to get back on a regimen of medication or a change in medication. They might be good to go again. But, they're not going to be able to do that for themselves. We need people to be in the community that see that this older adult's self-neglecting and make the phone call, report. Now, I'm sure we're all aware of what this picture indicates. Hoarding. Unfortunately, there's even a TV show that people believe is entertaining, and I don't know how anyone can watch that show and find that entertaining. It's sad. It's upsetting to me. I refuse to even put it on the television because it's not humorous, it's not entertaining, it's not educational, it's alarming, it's upsetting, and it's sad. It's neglect. It's people self-neglecting, and it can lead to other medical conditions. If all of a sudden you have rodents nesting in that house, these folks are going to be subject to a lot of illness and disease. Unsafe, it's hazardous. Sometimes they have no heat, no plumbing. Sometimes it's just totally unsanitary. And like I said, insect and animal infestation is really, really bad news. Inadequate clothing, lack of medical aids. They don't purchase eyeglasses or hearing aids or dentures. They like the old ones. Well, the old ones may not be effective any longer, but they don't like change. People are dealing with hoarders, I see, and that's a shame. I mean, again, we need to get someone involved from the aging office. Most of the counties are called the County Area Agency on Aging. I do know that Philadelphia calls theirs the Philadelphia Corporation on Aging.
PCA for
Yep.
short.
And there's a few others that have some, variable names that aren't quite the same as the aging office, but they all have the same authority and effect that they go out and investigate claims of this type of complaint, and they want to know what they can do about it.
Yeah.
I see that Allegheny County has a hoarding task force. That's fantastic. I don't know what other counties have that service, but you can always call to inquire.
Philadelphia has a hoarding task force. In fact, we are right now working with PA Behavioral Health in trying to identify hoarding task force across the state of Pennsylvania. So if your county that you work in has a hoarding task force, please let your HSR know so we can pass on that information. They're trying to compile a list because it is still a problem. It started being recognized as a problem about 3-4 years ago. It came into the limelight. It has been here before, but it's really come to the height right now.
I had a situation where a person made a report to our office on our elder abuse helpline stating that they were in a store, and it was in Lower Bucks County, and they were at a grocery store. This lady seems to visit the store about once or twice a week, and she noticed another customer who was coming in almost as often, and this customer was an older woman, maybe in her late 70s, and her car was so filled with refuse and trash and all sorts of junk that she didn't understand how it was safe for her to drive it. So she made a report. Got the tag number. We got the information of where that person lived. She lived 2 counties away from the store she's visiting twice a week. We called local law enforcement, had the police department just check on the well-being of that person at their home, and sure enough, the home was worse than the car. She was in terrible condition. She was dehydrated and confused. And for some reason, she kept driving all this way. It was an hour and a half drive to get to this grocery store. And she must have passed 200 other grocery stores to get there. So we believe there were some other cognitive issues, and we did get her into some programs and some help. So, it can be something as simple as just taking note that the car is overflowing with items. That's probably going to be a cue that there's more problems at home. Neglect itself is defined as refusal or failure to fulfill a person's obligations of duties to an elder. So that could be a lot of different things. It could be life necessities, food, water, clothing, shelter, hygiene, medicine, personal safety, medications. All these things could fall under this, getting an exam, going to a physician, having yourself checked out. When a caregiver, and that can be a professional or a non-professional, a family member can be considered a caregiver. You don't have to be paid to be a caregiver, and some family members are paid through the waiver program and other programs of the state and county. So, a caregiver can be a lot of things. But we also know that a caregiver can sometimes neglect that patient, and that's a crime. That's under our Elder Abuse Act. So we need to be alert to that. We need to be watchful. If somebody has bed sores and they're not being cared for, they can actually just start to rot away, and we've seen cases of that, and it's really upsetting. I got news for you. Neglect of a care-dependent person under the Pennsylvania Crimes Code is Section 2713. Basically, care-dependent person is any adult who, due to physical or cognitive disabilities or impairment, requires assistance to meet his needs for food, shelter, clothing, personal care, or health care. So a care-dependent person doesn't have to be over 60. Anyone adult is 18 years of age and older. So 18 to 59 are care-dependent adults. Elderly and seniors are 60 and older, but they all fall under this code of care-dependent person. Neglect, we define caretakers here. Again, owner or operator or manager. It could be the employee of a nursing home, a residential care home, community residential facility, adult living, home health agencies, all these programs. Care-dependent people are described in paragraph 1, as we saw. They have an obligation to care for this person for monetary consideration in the settings described, or the care-dependent person's own home. So this is very serious. It is a crime. So if the caretaker neglects that person, they are under the suspicion of criminal activity. It's going to be investigated as such and hopefully prosecuted.
And this can also be a family member, correct?
Again,
it doesn't have to be...
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's any person who has that responsibility of giving care. Of course, there's elements of a crime, and the elements are here in sections 1 and 2, where you'll see intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly causes bodily injury, serious bodily injury, by failing to provide treatment, care, goods, or services necessary to preserve health, safety, or welfare of a care-dependent person for whom they are responsible to provide care. And that can be a shared responsibility. There could be more than one people charged with this crime. You know, if there's two caregivers or a brother and sister are both responsible and one doesn't report the activities of the other, they can both be charged. Intentionally, knowingly uses a physical restraint, right? Strapping people down, that kind of thing. Chemical restraint or medication. You can overdose someone to make them lethargic. Well, that's a chemical restraint. If you're using it on a care-dependent person and you isolate that care-dependent person, contrary to the law or regulation such that bodily injury or serious injury results, that's an element of the crime. You can be charged. This just tells you that it's a misdemeanor of the first degree. The victim suffers bodily injury. If it escalates to serious bodily injury, it's going to be a felony of the first degree. Misdemeanor if it's just bodily injury under Section A2, and violation, again, of A2 with serious injury also is a felony of the first degree. Caregiver neglect, lack of medical aids, devices, these are all warning signs. If you see somebody that's bedridden and never gets out of bed, is never moved, that could be caregiver neglect. A person with dementia left unsupervised, just not being supervised, could constitute and rise to the level of caregiver neglect. Untreated pressure ulcers, and that's bed sores, right? Soiled bedding, they're in their own feces or urine. That's going to cause breakdown of the skin, and they're going to be in bad pain. That's bad news. These are all issues.
And this scenario is more kind of like in the nursing home setting, but it could
be in their own home.
It could be in their own home, because independent living, we are moving more towards bringing outside services in so that the person doesn't have to move to a nursing home. So it could be taking place in independent living.
A lot of older adults refuse to go to the nursing care facility. They want to age at a place at their own home, and the state allows for that. You know, people have rights. People should be able to make some decisions for themselves. So as long as they're capable of making the decision that they want to age at home, services can be provided at the home. But again, when you're in a home setting, it's more private. There's less traffic. There's less opportunity for people to investigate what's going on unless a complaint's made. So I think that really kind of takes things to a new level, that the risk is greater sometimes when they're in a private home, you know, depending on the situation of who's providing the care and, you know, how committed they are to provide that care.
So, like, to be proactive, perhaps it's better for the service coordinators or property managers to know, you know, Mrs. Jones has a caregiver. These are the days that they're coming in, and so you can kind of watch, oh, well, no one's been there for 3 or 4 days.
Exactly.
Maybe I need to, you know, make a phone call and find out, you know, or go up and visit and find out what is going on, because you really should know who is coming into your building.
Right.
And, you know, who is being taken care of.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Alicia. And we also have to be concerned about if that caregiver is scheduled to be there 3 or 4 days a week and hasn't shown up for a week or two. You know, we could also look at that as Medicaid fraud. If Medicaid is helping to pay for that caregiver and they're billing for services that aren't being rendered, that's dipping into everyone's pocket as the taxpayers. So that's another issue as well, besides just the abuse. It could be a crime against Medicaid fraud.
Sometimes I know that some people on the webinar have reported it. You have to be like a dog with a bone.
Oh, yeah.
And you just need to keep after and follow up and just don't drop it.
You know, if someone's life is in danger, you know, if the person that you're reporting it to isn't taking it seriously, maybe you need to report to multiple agencies. Again, area agency on aging, your county services, the police department in your community, the Attorney General's office. You can contact us and make us aware of what's going on. You can reach out to other avenues. The Ombudsman program through the State Department of Aging. There's a lot of people that you can report to. Don't only report to one agency if you're not satisfied with what's happening. And one other thing I like to mention about reporting, and we're going to get more into this as we go through, but since the question did pop up on the screen, when you report something, quite often the information is confidential, and they're not going to share with you what has happened, when it's happened, or what the outcomes are, because they're not allowed to by law. So just because you're not hearing back, you don't see anything happening, doesn't always mean that nothing's happened. It just means that you may not be entitled to the information. So please keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I remember when I was up in Wilkes-Barre, and we were sitting getting the task force together, and the phone call came in. There was someone under investigation for like 6 months, and the call came in that they finally got him. But in the meantime, everybody's thinking, oh, nothing's happening, nothing's
Correct.
happening, nothing's
Right.
happening. And then all of a sudden they were able to nab the person.
The people didn't realize that we had a statewide manhunt for this individual, and he was finally captured the day of the meeting. That was great. Yeah, we got the call, and everyone kind of celebrated quickly that, we got this guy at least, and we can, make him accountable for his actions against that older adult. But, it's not like television. CSI, they solve every crime in 30 minutes. And they have all the high-tech tools that happen to give you the information in 30 seconds. That isn't reality. So there's budget restraints, there's manpower restraints, there's difficulty in tracking people sometimes. There's a lot. You have to build the evidence. You have to build a case. It's not what your perception may be of what should happen when you report something. But trust me, these reports are taken seriously, and they are looked at. And when action can be had, there's a lot of motivation to go out and get these people to stop this. So hopefully you'll continue to report. That's our goal here today, to give you some information about why it's important and how you should report. Again, more warning signs of elder abuse. Changes in that elder's behavior that you notice are uncharacteristic. Caregivers' refusal to allow visitors. A lot of times, again, isolation. They don't want people to be involved. We know that verbally aggression from the caregiver, or they're acting in a way that is demeaning to the elder adult. We see that when they're getting them in and out of the car. Maybe they're out shopping with the older adult. They're escorting them to a doctor's visit, and they have very short patience with that adult. They're shouting and barking at them the whole time. They're not seeming very caring. These are warning signs that something might not be a good relationship there.
Do agencies that hire caregivers, do they have standards? Are there, I would assume that they have to go through, clearances.
Right.
But, do they have something in place to kind of help with this so the situation doesn't come?
The better ones do, yeah. But again, sometimes you can just say, well, my cousin Johnny is going to be my caregiver. Well, then there's nothing. If they want to be paid, they have to go and take a course at the county aging office. But if they're non-paid and it's just a family member, there is no controls, there is no standards, there's no way to know what that person's background or experience is or how they're handling that older adult, because they the older adult voluntarily gave the control to a family member. And if they're not under our radar, so to say, because they're being paid or compensated, we may not even know that relationship exists. So sometimes that's why it's important to notify people to watch for these kind of unusual occurrences, to maybe report it. A lot of banks are quick to report now. They're starting to get on the bandwagon because they realize that when these older adults are being abused and their finances are being stripped from them, there's going to be issues. There's going to be mortgage foreclosures perhaps. There's going to be evictions. There's going to be other costs against that senior that they're not going to be able to pay, and it's going to be a very unfortunate situation. So when the banks see, oh, there's this new person escorting, Mary Jane into the bank every couple of weeks, and they seem to be kind of pressuring her to withdraw funds, they're going to call aging services and go, hey, geez, this is unusual, claims to be a nephew, we don't know. Her spending habits for the last 20 years were no more than $500 a month that she spent on certain things, and now her account's bleeding money ever since this person came on scene. So the bankers are looking at it as taking on that obligation to report as well. So again, your community leaders, your service providers, your managers, you guys are in the neighborhoods, you're seeing these people come and go. Pay attention. That's all we're really asking, is be another set of eyes and ears, and if you see anything that doesn't look right, call. Simply make the call. Other elder abuse is physical abuse, which of course is pretty understandable. It's bodily injury, physical pain, impairment, striking, acts of violence, hitting, beating, pushing, shoving, shaking, slapping, kicking, burning. We've had cases where elderly were burnt with cigarettes. All sorts of horrific things. And I didn't put those kind of slides in. I didn't want to show you the injuries because they're really horrific. When we talk to nursing students, I do show those slides and some of the other groups. But I thought for this group we would cut you a little bit of a break on that. But I think you need to know how serious this can be, that it does go to extremes and people are tortured. And that's why it's important to pay attention. Unexplained fractures are warning signs, bruises, welts, cuts, sores, burns, fear. When every time that caregiver or family member shows up, the elderly person shrieks back and doesn't want to look them in the eye, something's going on. There's a problem more than likely occurring in that relationship. We also have emotional, or sometimes called mental, abuse, defined as infliction of anguish, pain, distress, through verbal and nonverbal acts. You've heard of someone giving somebody the evil eye, right? Somebody stares you down. So if you're 83 years old and you're waiting for your meal, and you ask about it twice, and the person that's preparing it gives you a dirty look, you might think twice to ask a third time. You might realize that look is intimidating, it's scary, and if you continue, you're probably going to end up turning into a physical situation. Warning signs, again, often they're upset and agitated, the older adult. They're extremely withdrawn, non-communicative. They don't want to look you in the eye. They don't want to speak. Sometimes they're sucking on their hand or biting themselves or rocking back and forth. Elders report simply of saying, I am being mistreated. Sexual abuse, a topic a lot of people don't like to discuss, but it does happen. It happens to people of all ages. We know child abuse. We're very familiar with that. That's all over the nation. Everyone's watchful of that. Protect the children. Well, we also have to protect our elderly. Sexual abuse has no age limit. It's non-consensual sexual contact of any kind with an elderly person. They're incapable, perhaps, of giving consent is also considered abuse. It's unwanted touching, sexual assault, battery, rape, all these situations, even explicit photographs. We had a situation where we got a report at the Attorney General's offices a few years ago where a person sent me a video clip they found on the internet. It was pretty disturbing. It was an older woman, probably around 83 years of age, being driven around in a car with a young lady in like a nursing type of uniform with two of her male friends, and they were probably in their early 20s. And they were driving her to the store, from what we could understand in the video. And the entire time they're in the car, one of the friends is videotaping the situation, and they were encouraging her and pushing her to touch the male driver of the car inappropriately, to say certain things. They were unbuttoning her blouse and making really crude comments to her and doing a lot of inappropriate things and videotaping this, and it was posted on the internet. I found it very alarming, and I took it upon myself, even off duty after hours, I would stay in the office, and I was trying to figure out a way to do something about it. But we had no idea where this happened, who the people were. But I noticed certain things in the background. I kept playing the video over and over and slowing it down. I saw palm trees. I saw names of certain stores I didn't recognize from here. So I just started plugging those into Google searches in the internet, the names of these stores, and I found that it was an area of California, and I contacted the Los Angeles Police Department and the LA County Sheriff's Office, and we got those folks involved. And believe it or not, when about 3 months later, I got an email telling me they found the people and they've arrested them. So, that was really unusual to have that kind of a long distance situation, but I was just determined I wasn't letting that go because I found it really upsetting that they did that. So, even something as simple as photography, video, these things are abusive. Red flags, warnings, again, their fear of being alone with certain people, probably an indicator there's a problem. Bruising around certain areas of the body, unexplained disease or infections, unexplained vaginal or anal bleeding, torn, stained, bloody clothing, underwear, and their comments of being mishandled or inappropriately assaulted or raped. These are all things that need to be taken extremely seriously. Risk factors, they're socially isolated or withdrawn, so they may not be in the public view for people to witness there's a problem. Poor health, dementia, mental health, or substance abuse issues. Sometimes the elderly over-medicate themselves. Perpetrator might have mental health or substance abuse. If a family member or a caregiver is abusing drugs or has mental issues, that often leads to abuse of the elderly that they're caring for. Female elders are abused at a higher rate than males, 67%. Part of that is there's more females in that age bracket than there are males, so we know that, right? 2010 study found that 47% of the participants with dementia had been mistreated by caregivers. Elderly may be reluctant to report abuse themselves due to fear of retaliation, lack of the ability, they may not be able to speak. Family dynamics, right? If your daughter-in-law or your son-in-law is the person, or your cousin or your brother or your granddaughter that's abusing you, you don't want to disturb the family dynamic. You don't want to upset other family members. You don't want to have people hating other family members. So they put up with it. They don't want to report it.
Or it could also be that the person that's abusing them is the only contact person that they have. And if they report them and something happens to them, they have absolutely nothing, and so they think being abused is better than not having that person in their life.
Perfectly stated. That's the next thing I was going to mention. Yeah, a lot of times it is the fear that this is my caregiver and the only person I depend upon. So if I report that person, they go to jail, I will not go to the store at all. I will not go to church. I will not go to the doctor. I will not get fed. I will not get my medication. They have such fear of those issues that they will actually tolerate the abuse not to lose that connection. And unfortunately, what they don't understand is if that person is incarcerated, we're going to provide other services for them. We're going to get them a ride to the doctor. We're going to have home health care. We're going to come make sure they get their medication and are fed. We're not going to let that senior not have the services they need because the caregiver was abusing them. We had to arrest them. So they may not understand that, and that's a big problem too. Victims, again, this is a generalization we see across the board. 38% are over the age of 81. 77% are Caucasian. 67% of them are female. We also know that 500,000 seniors are victims of domestic abuse each year, and that's reported cases. So imagine how many go unreported. And that's the biggest crime that I know of. The fact that we aren't reporting, people aren't stepping forward, and a lot of this goes under the carpet. And a lot of times, I don't know if you've seen recently in the news in the last couple of months, the Attorney General's office went after nursing care facilities that were mistreating seniors, and they were cooking the books. They were showing on their records that there was more caregivers assigned on a shift than there actually were. People weren't being changed appropriately at the right times. They would go days without being bathed or showered or changed. They weren't being fed on a regular schedule, not being medicated properly. There was a lot of concerns, and you can, of course, go to the Attorney General website at www.attorneygeneral.gov and click on the press releases, and you can look at these cases. So, when we get involved, we take action. The problem is we have to sometimes wait to be involved due to the way the laws are written. We don't always have first jurisdiction to investigate these type of cases. That's why reporting it locally is so important first, because that's where this starts. 16% of the cases were believed that were reported, and family members are frequent offenders. 47% are by adult children. 9% by other family members, 20% are spouses that are abusing. Perpetrators, 55% of them mistreating older adults are 30 to 59 years of age. Majority of those are women, 64% are female. Consistent with women in the caregiving role and is similar to statistics throughout the United States. Family members who abuse drugs and alcohol, I think we hit on that a little bit. Sometimes they just feel burdened by their caregiving responsibilities as another issue that contribute to higher rates of abuse than those who do not feel that way.
I think maybe part of that is why, like, adult daycares are really becoming a big business, but that only works if you can financially afford
that, right.
the adult daycare.
You know, the adult daycares are a great outlet. It's a great place to have somebody be cared for and entertained and give yourself a break. But if you can't afford that, you can always call the Department of Aging in your county. There is a program where they will give you a break. You say, you know, look, I've been giving care for my elderly family member for 3 months. I haven't had a day off. I haven't had a vacation. I'm getting burned out. They will afford, through grants, to send someone in and give you a 2 or 3 day break. They'll have people assigned to help that person out. You know, so there is other avenues to take. Being angry and becoming abusive is not the direction to go in. And, you know, frustration can lead to people not making good judgment, and we understand that. But there is other services available to step in, so there's no excuse for it. Disabled persons, 14 million U.S. seniors have disabilities. 19 million, the ages 18 to 64 have disability. That's those care-dependent adults. Unfortunately, some of these vulnerable adults are abused, and we know that, and it's quite unfortunate. Adult women with disabilities, 67 had experienced physical abuse. 53% experienced sexual abuse. That's a sampling of 200 adult women with disabilities. The men, 55% experienced physical abuse after becoming disabled. 12% stated they experienced physical abuse by a personal assistant or a service provider over their lifetime. None of that should be. 2009 study revealed that close to 50% of people with dementia experienced some type of abuse. This is nursing homes and long-term care. 47% of participants with dementia had been mistreated by caregivers. 2,000 nursing home residents were screened, and they reported that 44% had been abused. 95% said they had been neglected or seen other residents neglected, not being cared for in a timely fashion, not being tended to, not responding to emergency calls, that kind of thing. You know, and sometimes it's simple things, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a personal story real quick. My mother has passed away, and unfortunately she spent the last 2.5 years of her life in a nursing home. She was between a nursing home and a hospital back and forth due to a stroke early on in her life. And we went to visit. My dad was there every single day. We were there 3 or 4 times a week. You know, so they knew we were in and out a lot. So, and the place was great. I got to be honest. It was in Philadelphia, and sometimes, you know, just because it's in the city doesn't mean it's going to be a bad place. It was great. The people seemed very caring, very alert. But simple things happen sometimes. My mom was on a ventilator. She had difficulty breathing, and her ventilator tube got disconnected. She was having trouble breathing and couldn't reach the nurse call button. It was moved to change the sheets in the bedding, and it wasn't clipped back onto the bed rail. It was hanging there next to the bottom of the bed. Just a simple mistake. It wasn't done intentionally. No one was trying to abuse her. It was an error. Someone didn't clip the call button back up on the sheet by the pillow. We happened to come in to visit while my mother's laying in bed gasping for air, throwing things off the bed, the pillow, the box of tissues, anything towards the door to try and get someone's attention to assist her. Luckily, we got there in time, and we had the nurses run in, and they took care of her. And they were very apologetic, you know, and we didn't take any action. It was a mistake. It was just an error. But these are the kind of things that, if that happens too often, that's more neglect than it is a mistake. Once, and the whole time she was there, we had a problem, we can oversee that. You know, we didn't make an issue out of it. But if that becomes a regular occurrence, every week, every day, there's an issue like that, that's a problem at that facility. That needs to be investigated. The impact that abuse has on our older adults, even modest abuse, there's a claim that 300% higher risk of earlier death when compared to those who had not been abused. Research shows higher levels of psychological distress, lower perceived self-efficacy than older adults have not been victimized. There's a chart, Pennsylvania elder abuse from 2010-2011 from the Department of Aging on their report indicates cases that were found. Self-neglect, 37.5%. Caregiver neglect, 27%. Financial, 15.3%. Emotional abuse, 14.8%. Physical abuse at 4.5%. And sexual abuse at 1%. And these are the reported cases to the Department of Aging of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Our report line that we have is a separate line, mostly to deal with financial and consumer-related issues and Medicaid fraud and those type of things. We find financial exploitation to be our number one call. So for us, those numbers are a little bit different, but we have a different role in the elder abuse arena, so that should be taken into consideration when we talk about these complaints and the percentages. We in Pennsylvania have the Pennsylvania Older Adult Protective Services Act. Anyone with reasonable cause to believe an older adult requires protective services may report to local services, and that's the Area Agency on Aging, the Philadelphia Corporation on Aging, and those organizations. Several safeguards are in place for you making a report. You have protection from retaliation. You have immunity from liability. So if you make that report and nothing's wrong, they're not going to sue you. You're protected by law. Don't hesitate to report because you're afraid you're going to be wrapped up in a lawsuit because there was nothing going on and you perceive something to be a problem. I'd rather you err on the side of caution and call. You are protected by law. This is our hotline for the Office of Aging and Adult Protective Services. This is the number you should be writing down. You should have it available to you. It is 1-800-490-8505. Again, it's 1-800-490-8505. And that will get you, no matter what county you're in, it will automatically direct the call to that county you are closest to for Adult Protective Services. And I know we have people from all over the state online today with us. Some of the counties do not have their own Adult Protective Services agency. They have a shared agency. There might be 2 or 3 counties sharing one service provider. That is okay. The number, again, will get you into the closest call center that is servicing your community in your county. So everyone can use the same telephone number. Under the law, the Adult Protective Services Act, reports of abuse must be investigated within 72 hours. An older adult that is deemed to be by the Protective Services Unit in imminent risk of death or serious harm, the agency may provide by the court through an emergency order to provide whatever services are necessary. And that could be removing that person from the situation, taking them out of that home, out of that care facility, wherever they are, and replacing them into another care facility for their protection. It also includes removing some family member that might be causing the problem in that older adult's home. Rather than moving the elderly, we could move the problem and have them evicted from those residents as well. All who work in the following locations are considered mandatory reporters of elder abuse under the state laws: care homes, healthcare agencies, long-term care, nursing homes, adult day living centers, personal care homes. Oral reports are expected and required to be made immediately. All oral reports, a written report must follow within the next 48 hours, and that is the law, so you have to follow that.
So last time the question came up, are service coordinators and property managers mandatory reporters? Yes, to the degree where you are mandated to report to an agency that is then going to take care of the report.
Correct.
Correct. So the expectation is not for a service coordinator to fill out a report. It is their job to report it to the Area Office on Aging, the AAA, who will then take care of it.
Well, what I would suggest is, and I'm not an attorney, I don't know if I mentioned that in the beginning, I usually do, but I am a elder abuse unit coordinator. I'm not an attorney, so this isn't legal advice. I'm just giving you what the law states out of the books. I would do this to protect your own interest of you personally and your organization. As you make your oral report, I would sit down and just write a short summary of the situation, who you reported it to, the date and time you reported it to, the means of how you reported it. Was it by telephone, by an email form? What website did you go to? What number did you dial? Who did you speak to? That way, if there is a follow-up or a continued problem, you have a record of the situation, the date, the time, who was involved, who you contacted, and you can provide that if required. I would suggest that you do a short summary of the episode, of the incident, so to say, and keep it on record.
And only the facts, not opinions.
Not opinions, right. What you've seen, heard, that's what you put in the report, not what someone told you, not what you think. I witnessed Joe Brown, who is 82 years of age, who lives at 123 Elm Street in my community, be escorted by an unknown white male, appeared to be wearing a nursing-type shirt, escort him from the car, abruptly and aggressively, grabbed him by the scruff of his shirt, pulled him off his feet, yelled at him all the way to the home, and they entered the house at 1:35 p.m., end of my report. I then contacted Older Adult Services by calling 1-800 number and spoke to Susie at Chester County Aging Services, who said they would handle a follow-up on the report. Your name, your title, date, time, done. Just so you have that record. And again, don't make opinions. Oh, I think that's his nurse or his sister. I think it's this. If you don't know, then you don't add it to the report. According to Pennsylvania Code, a mandatory reporter who knowingly fails to report a case of suspected abuse commits a summary offense themselves for the first violation. So if you fail to report and someone says, well, I know there was a community manager or a service coordinator standing right there when this happened, you might have to answer for not making some type of a report in an effort to document the situation. So again, just to protect yourself, be sure that you do report it. Be sure you write up a summary, because you don't want to be charged with a criminal act. And if it's, after the first violation, it can become a misdemeanor, the third degree, and, you're looking at possible probation, parole, and then jail time even if it escalates. So, and what if that senior was killed that day during a lack of care or aggressive treatment? You don't want to be in that situation where you didn't act. You want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Older adults who lack the capacity to protect themselves or are at imminent risk of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and abandonment shall have access to be provided with services. The law says we have to have adult protective services. We have to have the Office of Aging. We have to have the State Department of Aging. We have to have something in place to help protect these older adults, and that's why these laws exist. They should safeguard the rights of incapacitated adults while protecting them from abuse. It's the intent of the General Assembly, that's your legislators, your state representatives, state senators, to provide for the detection and reduction and correction and elimination of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and abandonment. Again, the state says that we will have laws that will protect our seniors, and we're constantly reviewing these. As a matter of fact, our office right now is engaged with the legislator, trying to make some additions to these laws to make them a little more stringent, a little more protective, and to have a little more authority to investigate further and do more for people. So we are always looking to improve our laws across the Commonwealth of how we can protect our older adults. Abuse is the occurrence of one or more of the following acts. And again, I'm just going to rattle through these pretty quick. Injury, unreasonable confinement, intimidation, punishment. Deprived by a caretaker of goods or services which are necessary to maintain health. Sexual harassment, rape, or abuse. And exploitation, of course, is the conduct of a caretaker or other person who's using the adult's resources without the consent of that older adult and through misrepresentation, coercion, threats of force, that result in monetary, personal, or other benefit or gain. Neglect, failure to provide for oneself, or the caregiver failure to provide goods or services that are essential to avoid a clear and serious threat to physical or mental health. Now, we're not going to find that an older adult's been abused simply on the grounds that the environmental factors are beyond the control of that older adult or the caretaker. The housing is in disrepair and there's no funds there to do it. That may not constitute abuse. If the furnishings are very simple and older, they don't have a new sofa, a new chair to sit in, that's not abuse. If there's no money there in that person's accounts to cover those expenses without them taking away from some other necessary expense, we're not going to take action in that reference. Mandatory abuse reporting, again, we touched on that. The 800-490-8505 is going to be the number to use. Make sure you take that effort and make it seriously. Make a report of it. Reasonable suspicion of a crime must occur by everyone. Report within 2 hours if serious bodily injury is occurring. Report within 24 hours if it's not so serious, but it's still a matter that you believe could be abuse that's ongoing. Report to regulators and law enforcement. Again, the Area Agency on Aging, the Ombudsman at the State Department of Aging, or your local police. Approximately 320 law enforcement, judicial, and medical and social service professionals have been trained to identify and resolve and prosecute elder abuse cases. I attend these courses quite often. The Temple Institute on Adult Protective Services through Temple University are one of the key educators in this. They do a great job, and they are under contract by the State Department of Aging to do so. So far, they have helped to establish over 30 statewide elder abuse task forces. And now we also have some elder justice roundtables that are propping up. Montgomery County has one. I'm involved in that. Involved in Chester County, Bucks County, and a few others. So it's great that we have that task force alive and well. They're always working to improve services and get information out to seniors. Elder abuse can happen anywhere. Private home, in the public eye, in a nursing home, in a care facility. It can be done by anyone. It can be a family member, a close friend, a person in control or an authority position, such as, again, financial planners, attorneys, funeral directors, medical providers, family members, anybody.
And also a senior with a senior.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Sometimes we have a tendency to overlook, that part, because you're like, no way would another senior do that to another senior.
Spouses are quite often, as you saw in one of these statistics that we showed you, a lot of times it's spouse-to-spouse abuse. It can also be just a senior that's a neighbor who, I've had enough of you, you don't cut your grass. Well, maybe the person's disabled to a point where they can't cut their grass, but they don't have the funds to hire someone, or maybe they're not having the mental capacity to realize they need to hire someone. And then the neighbor comes over and gets angry with that person, and that escalates. There could be a lot of different situations. Our office now actually has a new program that we've released. I think it came out about April. It's abuse through bullying of older adults. And we call it the good, the bad, and the ugly of older adult bullying. So we can always provide those services and come out and do a program for your older adults in your community. It's free of charge. Takes about 45 minutes to have the program.
Awesome.
Some online resources: National Center on Elder Abuse, National Association of Triad. Of course, AARP is a great resource, a lot of information there as well. National Criminal Justice Reference, the State Department of Aging, and of course our office, the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General. Go to the websites, you can Google search these agencies and get a lot of good information for free right on the internet. Our helpline is not an emergency reporting line. If you have to report elder abuse, I want you to use the number from the Adult Protective Services that we provided you earlier. This is if you just have a question, you want some follow-up, you have a consumer concern, you have an issue with a senior who might be taking advantage of financially in some other ways, such as being misled on travel arrangements, purchasing the car, investments, that kind of thing. Then you can give us a call. We'll try to be involved. But the other forms of abuse must be reported directly first through the Aging Services office in your county rather than calling us. If you forget, we get the call, we're going to redirect it, but that's fine. That concludes the program. Alicia, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I hope everyone gained some good information today.
Thank you, Dave. As always, a great presentation. Just need a few minutes here.
Technology is great till it fails.
Yes, well, it's not failing. You stopped the presentation off my screen, and now I can't remember how to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So our I'd like to thank you for being a part of the webinar and to the CESC participants.